Welcome to Complete Edition, the podcast between a PlayStation Trophy Hunter and an Xbox Achievement Hunter. This is episode 26. I'm your host, Compulsive Nerd, and I'm joined by AJ. How you doing, AJ?
I'm doing well. I'm stressed, but other than that, I've been gaming a lot. I said last time that I'd got back into gaming and was ready to just like play a ton of stuff, and I have done that. So I'm happy about that. Excited to talk about it. But things are going okay. I feel like I've just really settled into a good rhythm with everything. I'm at the stage where like with the PhD that I'm currently doing, it's like I've got like tons of textbooks and tons of reading, and there's just like so much that it can be overwhelming, and there's never like a natural stopping point with anything, which is weird to adjust to. But I think everything's going well. Everyone's really supportive where I'm at the university, and there's lots of exciting things in the works. And I've seen all the labs and got to sort of mess around with some stuff, and it's been good.
That's awesome. I, unlike you, have not had time to game because I went and traveled, and I went to Richmond, Virginia, and that was my first time ever going there, which was really cool. I saw Monticello, which is Jefferson's estate, and I saw the Edgar Allan Poe Museum. So I didn't game a lot. I played a little bit of Stardew Valley on like the plane and stuff, but I don't think I've gotten any trophies on it. And then I've been furniture shopping because I'm about to move in 2 weeks. And then also this morning, like I woke up early, and it was like the first time in a long time where I'm like, wow, I'm up early and I'm not tired. I didn't need coffee or anything. I just kind of got up and went. And I started like, right now my walls are so sad. They're all barren. It's like, oh man, I'm really moving. Like I'm disappearing out of this space. And so I just went and got a box, which is kind of why I was a little late. I was on the road, and there's a ton of construction like over near like the shopping district. And I was on my way back, and I'm like, I got to get off this road. I'm going to be on this road for half an hour. So I took like a back road, and it ended up being way faster. But I got another storage crate, and I'm about to pack all like my figurines, like my Nathan Drake and my wrench and like Aloy, like all of my like figurines that sit on my desk. So my desk is going to be barren soon. But yeah, I mean, not much time to game. I'll talk about, I did finish Cyberpunk whenever this week, and I'll talk more about that later. And then I also have a little discussion with that, which is super exciting because I've been asking a lot of people, and it's really interesting to hear what people say about it. But yeah, I mean, I haven't had much time to game. I'm hoping that I get more time to game this week. Really excited. But I wanted to ask you about your PhD. Do you, with not having a place to stop, do you ever feel overwhelmed, or is there like a time where you're just like, okay, I need to like eat, and then I'm just gonna take a break for the night? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I try to treat it kind of like a 9 to 5, and there's a lot of stuff to break up that as well in terms of there's like a lot of guest seminars and lectures that you get invited to, both in the department and in just like the broader, I guess, community. So that's quite nice because it's stuff that you don't get access to as an undergraduate. So it's quite cool to go to stuff like that, and then you can sort of talk about and look at other people's research and stuff like that, which is nice to sort of get away from what you're doing. And then the other aspect that's good is there's always like I've had to do a bunch of training stuff, and that can like break up the reading, or you can do reading from like on really vastly different topics, and that can help with your background and getting an idea for where you want to go next in terms of research. For me, it was important that the project that I was doing, which I'm doing some stuff on photocatalysis, gives me an opportunity to sort of do some synthesis, some analysis, some like theoretical, some computational. It's quite nice to be able to do things in lots of different areas of chemistry, because then it doesn't get, I guess, monotonous or uninteresting. But the other worry is that you end up spreading yourself too thin as well. But it's really exciting at the moment, and I'm enjoying it.
Are you ready to start talking about what we're chasing?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start since I really played almost nothing. I finished Cyberpunk 2077, and I accidentally went with an ending that I didn't mean to go with. I kind of like chose the dialogue options for the ending that I wanted to see, and then it asked me again like to contact different characters, and I did, and then it changed my ending, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was going to change my ending. I should have probably just continued to be like, no, I'm not going to talk to anyone. and then that would have ended with the ending that I wanted. And then that brings up the discussion that I wanted to ask you about is like when you're a completionist and you are running through games and they have more than one ending, is the ending that you see first your ending, or is it the ending that you choose after you've seen them all?
It's a good question. Maybe. What you were saying reminded me that I find, especially where you have like missable achievements, getting to the end of a game is like the most stressful part because a lot of, especially like role playing games, there's tons of like, oh, if you do this before you do this, then you're locked out of this, and then you have to do a whole new playthrough. The people know that there's loads of games that do that kind of thing. So going towards the end, it's like super stressful. I mean, like like I don't know, let's say like Mass Effect 2, for example. That game, obviously, you have to make sure you've got everything lined up in just the right way, otherwise you'll need to do another playthrough or go back to a save, and who knows how far back that save will be. So I find that quite stressful but quite fun as well, to sort of line everything up perfectly in terms of getting the endings that you want. There's a bit of that in Elden Ring as well, where like you have to do the conditions to be able to activate certain endings before a certain point of no return in the story, and there's no like the game just auto saves over one file, so you can't go back essentially past that point. So that stuff's pretty difficult to deal with sometimes, although I don't think I've ever been catastrophically screwed over by it. In terms of the way I see, like, is the first ending my ending or not? It depends, I think. Depends on if you have to replay the whole game. I think partly I feel like if I don't have to replay the whole game, then I usually like the final ending to be my like canon ending, because if you're just sort of like going through the endings in a row, then it's nice to sort of leave the game on sort of your true ending, if that makes sense, rather than doing like your true ending and then doing the other endings afterwards. I feel like it sort of fits more nicely into my mind that way. But if it's something where you have to do several playthroughs, it's nice to have like the first playthrough be like the pure playthrough, the playthrough where you try to get 100%, the playthrough where you try to be true to the character, and then the others are just sort of like cleanup playthroughs where I tend to get less invested in the role playing aspects because I already know where the story's going. There's branches that are surprising, but the general sort of main story, you usually sort of know what's going on already, and it's hard to sort of be in the moment. So I think that's how I really see it.
That's an interesting take. I really like the idea of the last one that you see as like the canon one that you want. With Cyberpunk, it's very interesting because there are 4 endings and they are all tied to side quests. And so they're technically all missable, but if you just reload like before the last one, if you've done like there's like 4 or 5 characters and you've done all of their side quests, then you can't miss any of the endings, but you get to choose which ending you go through every single time the game, like, there's the point of no return. You go back there, you load the, like, after it's over, you just load back, and then you can go to the, like, through that point of no return again and then just see another ending. And so it really is how you want to play it. And so each one, I'm like, I just wanted to, that character, I finished their side quests, I want to see the ending with them. That character, I saw their side quests, I want to see the ending with them. And then it's just like choosing. There's one ending. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I mean, you don't have to have. I mean, you could have. There's people who could have chose to like not have any friends and like just ended the game that way, and that's a different ending. It's just all depends on like how you want to do it, and so
I think the way I see it with what I was saying before is it's sort of like what you said about going back to the point of no return or loading an earlier save. To me, that feels like my character at that point is like the same character, if that makes sense, and you sort of like unwinding what you've done because you do the ending and then you go back to the save to sort of essentially revert like that ending and cancel it out and then go do the next one and cancel it out and go do the next one. And so I think that's why when I do it in that sense, I like the final ending to be sort of my true ending or like the best ending, because that's sort of the final one is the one that you never revert, the one that you sort of leave and you say like that's the story. Whereas if it's a game where you're doing multiple playthroughs, I guess it's like completely distinct characters that aren't the same. They're just sort of like separate on their like
absolutely.
separate journeys, if
Yeah,
that makes
and
sense.
I'm curious because usually with games with multiple endings, there has to be some kind of tie, and they've said that there's going to be Cyberpunk DLC in 2023, and so it's kind of like the same situation that you were talking about, where like the last one, I do kind of want that. Maybe I'll even play it like a fifth time through and be like, this is my canon ending, and then I'm going to save here. That way, if the DLC that they release, because I don't know anything about it, but if it happens to continue or something, then it's like, or if it's a new character, who knows? But it's like, I want my ending to be there. I want that to be tied to whatever continues forward instead of just like all of these that I've done, because I've been watching them. I finished so far I finished 2 out of the 4. And then I just got busy. And speaking of that, I was last week I was at 18 out of 45 trophies, and this week I'm at 26 out of 45 trophies, and it puts me at 57% because I beat the game, I got a gold trophy, and that does a huge percentage boost. And so I'm getting closer. I'm getting a lot closer to the Cyberpunk plat, which means that I need to sit down and platinum SpongeBob. So that's something that I'm going to do. Hopefully, actually, maybe tomorrow. I think I might spend the whole day because I don't have any plans, but I might pick up some shifts Wednesday and Thursday this week. So I won't be able to game very much. But like the whole point is like I could just sit down and get that platinum, and then whenever I go back to Cyberpunk, I'll hit my 225th with Cyberpunk, which I'm super excited about. And also, this is the last thing I have to say because this is all I played this week. But the next game I think I'm going to play is Sifu, and I'm going to do it the way it was intended. I'm not going to drop it down to easy. I'm going to bang my head against the wall and try to platinum it the way that it was intended. And I'm kind of excited because the game is really hard, I've heard, but it's interesting how there's levels to the game. And my best friend was describing this to me because I don't know very much about it, but he said if you like beat the first level and you don't die, then when you start the second level, you can die as many times as you want and restart it, and you'll start with that same like age because it has that age mechanic. I don't know if you remember or if any of the audience.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the mechanics of the game where you want to get like an
Yeah.
ideal run of each level so
Yes.
that you're at the lowest age possible, because otherwise you have to like replay the whole game essentially if you set yourself up in like a bad like I don't know, like age 70 on like level 2, then it's going to be really hard to beat the game then.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the developers really could have screwed the achievement and trophy hunters by just being like, yeah, get through the whole game without like any checkpoints and don't die, because that would have been so hard for people. But I like the idea that I'm going to be checkpointed because I've played games like that before, Evil Within, for example, where you just have to like go through with a certain number of saves, and it's just like, got to do it. You got to get through, but it feels good to be like, oh, I'll hit that checkpoint. Maybe I died once, my age went up a little bit. It's like I can handle this, and then I can get through with still hitting that trophy or achievement of like getting it's low age and beating the game or whatever. But I'm ready. I'm ready to try it because that game looks awesome, dude. The combat and the mechanics and the animations like look really awesome. Like I think it's the best kind of like fighting game I've ever seen. So I really am excited to like play that, but that's a little bit more in the future because again, I have to finish. I want to do SpongeBob, Cyberpunk, and then that'll be my 226th if I ever get it. It'll be hard, but yeah.
Yeah, that game looks great. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts about it. So for me, I've been playing a lot. I played a bad game first. It's called Who's Your Daddy? And Maka contacted me to make a couple of full game walkthroughs, which I've made, but they're not up on the channel yet. So I did one for Who's Your Daddy, and then I did one for Subnautica Below Zero. And Subnautica's fantastic, and Who's Your Daddy is kind of terrible. But the reason Who's Your Daddy is like interesting as an achievement game is that it has a free trial on Xbox that lasts for 2 hours, and during those 2 hours you can unlock achievements, and you can beat the game in about like 30-40 minutes or so. But the game was way more annoying than I expected it to be. It's kind of like a streamer bait, like janky game. It's like a multiplayer game where one of you plays as a baby and one of you plays as the dad, and the baby has to try to kill himself while the dad has to try and stop the baby from killing himself. So you play as like a baby in the house, and you might like try and, I don't know, drown in the bathtub or put yourself in the freezer or what, try to figure out, find some bleach and drink it, that kind of thing. And the dad is kind of like chasing you around, and it's kind of cool. Like I kind of like that concept. It is, it's quite crude and just really basic and bare bones, but I watched a few streamers play it, and I thought it seemed quite funny and interesting, and people can sort of riff off of it quite well. So I didn't think it would be as much of a nightmare as it was, but it's I don't. So around half the achievements are completely glitched and will only unlock when they feel like it. There's an achievement for drinking a lot of bleach and for feeding the baby 25 fruit and 25 pills and drowning 25 times. And none of them
Jesus.
track properly. So you don't get any tracking on the actual like Xbox like guide button, but then also they don't seem to track in the game at all or get detected properly. So I had to like drown myself like 50, 75 times. And this was really frustrating as well because this happened on my recording run. So I'm trying to record like a walkthrough to make this easy for people, but the game just doesn't work. So it's like, how do you, like, I'm doing everything correctly, but it's just not unlocking. So it's like, what should be like a 20 to 30 minute completion ended up being, I think, 1 hour, 30 minutes. So I kind of just sent it to Macro and was like, you're probably going to have to edit a bunch of this down. And I gave him some notes of like everything I was doing. And you end up doing the thing where you like back out and try to change some settings around, try to change like the costume of your character or something, close the game, reopen the game, like try to get it to start detecting things. But I was getting really unlucky and nothing was working for ages. And then I was starting to panic as well because I mentioned that the game has a free trial, but the trial's only for 2 hours. So if you don't get all the achievements in those 2 hours, you then either have to buy the game, which you're probably not going to feel too happy about given like how miserable the experience is, or you can log into like a different Xbox account, start a free trial on that account, and then invite your other gamer tag to the game, and you can still unlock achievements that way. I think, or yeah, on the same Xbox you can do that. I think. Thankfully, I never had to because I got it like 30 minutes before the trial ran out. But you also need two controllers as well. You need to like because it's a multiplayer only game. Thankfully, it has local co-op, which makes it less annoying. And it's still an easy completion, and it's worth doing because it's like free gamer score. But I don't know. I had a pretty miserable time, especially because I was making a guide for it. Just because it and the trial thing giving you that like time pressure and just wanting to do things the right way, and it controls really badly as well. It's got like that again. It's that like type of like janky where it's like, oh, it controls badly on purpose, you know, and it's funny and goofy, but really annoying when you're trying to get all the achievements.
Yeah, that's that sounds
Yeah,
miserable.
it's still worth the time, but you're just going to sort of hate yourself while you're playing it. And then I did Subnautica Below Zero, and this game's kind of like the opposite because I did an achievement walkthrough, and I can't really recommend it enough for achievement hunters. It's on Game Pass, so you know if you have Game Pass, you can get the completion really easily. And if you use console commands, that's the really fast way to get achievements. You can do it like play the game naturally and get the achievements, or use console commands and sort of teleport around and give yourself infinite oxygen and stuff like that. And that makes the completion about 30 minutes. And it's unlike Who's Your Daddy, it's a very consistent 30 minutes. I did all the achievements, I think, twice. And both times it was super consistent. I think one run took me like 29 minutes, and then another one took me like 31 minutes. So it's a very, very polished game. And it's also a really fun game to play normally. I think the story's quite weak, but I really love the visuals and the exploration and the sense of wonder and discovery you get, but also the fear of the unknown and, you know, the sea creatures and monsters and all of that stuff, and aliens and everything that shows up in the game. You're sort of that there's an aspect of tension that works really well, but also like a rewarding sense of discovery, and the two play off each other really well. And I think a lot of good survival games do this. I think Minecraft does this quite well as well. And what's also great about this game and the original Subnautica is it's a crafting, you know, survival type game, but it's not procedurally generated. So all of the map is like the same every time. So it's been like handcrafted, and you feel like you're learning more about the environment, and you're always finding out more about the game, and it feels like you're actually, you know, charting the place, like you actually feel like you get to grips with everything. And yeah, the achievements are good, but it's a game that you'll play and you'll get the easy achievements, and then you'll kind of fall in love with it and want to play more of it just regularly, which is kind of the best thing that the game can do, really. I don't know if you have any experience with either Subnautica game.
I don't have any experience with the Subnautica game, but I do have them. They were free on not PS Plus. They were just free. It was like during the pandemic, Sony gave out like a bunch of games.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, and Subnautica was one of the free games, so I do own it, and I wanted to play it at some point because I have heard on podcasts before like people really love that game, and like I've also heard like people fear that game because there's a lot of people who have like underwater like fear of deep sea or whatever. And
Yeah, I mean it's
I really do want
stressful
to play it.
ultimately. Like even if you don't like, I'm not particularly scared of the ocean or water or deep. I mean deep sea creatures are kind of spooky, like definitely. But it's also the fact that you run out of oxygen, you can run out of food. You're super deep in the ocean. It takes ages to come back up. That kind of thing. Like even without sort of the environment trying to kill you and the different creatures, it's kind of also quite daunting as well.
I have a question about the zero part. Is this a DLC or like what is the extension or
Oh, so below zero is
below zero?
referring to the temperature, I believe, because it's sort of in this like ice like area, like everything's freezing cold.
So is it an expansion?
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like a standalone expansion. Like you don't need the original game, but it's not like a full sequel. It's
Mm.
kind of like a, I don't know, like 20-hour type expansion to the original game. But I don't know. I'm not sure how like I don't know enough of the details in terms of like how big it is compared to the original in terms of scope. But I was definitely having a fun time with it, so I'd recommend it. And the guide should be really easy to follow as well. Hopefully, when that comes up.
Honestly, I could use something like that later this year because I've been playing so many long games just to stack my completions this year. Just be like, I'll play something that's like gonna take me 30 to 45 minutes for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I mean SpongeBob's great for that as well. It's a few hours, but
Yeah.
it's quite easy. And then I played Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite Season 2 came out,
Ooh.
and I'm quite underwhelmed by it. Clearly, 343 have had a lot of issues on like the back end with Halo Infinite and putting out fires all over the place. But this season's 6 months long, which is quite disappointing. I was hoping for 4 months or 3 months, and it's got like two maps and a few modes, and the maps are good. I'd say that I wish it was 4 maps instead of two maps, or 6 maps. That'd be great, but it's not. So that's sad. And they added a mode, Last Spartan Standing, and it's pretty bad, which kind of sucks because there's already not that much content being added this season. So one of the modes not being very good isn't good because you kind of put more emphasis on it. If you've got less stuff being added, you want the stuff that is being added to be like super impressive. It's, I don't know, people seem to camp all the time, and it's not balanced very well in that it's kind of like a combination of gun game from Call of Duty with a battle royale mode where you basically take fights, and then when you get kills, you get experience that lets you upgrade your loadout to typically better weapons. The first problem is the first few weapons you get aren't better than the starting Magnum, so it kind of feels not that satisfying. And then the second big issue is that you're on this massive map, and there's like a zone closing in that's meant to like force you into more fights because it pushes you towards the center of the map and makes the total map smaller. But it comes in way too slowly, and you only have 5 lives for the whole mode. So you're better off kind of playing really slowly and not taking fights unless you're sort of guaranteed to win them, and just sort of, I don't know, hanging back mostly. And that just makes the pacing really dull and uninteresting. Like if you play to win versus playing for fun, it's two totally different play styles. So I don't really think the mode works very well. It's nice to have an excuse to jump back into Halo Infinite because the core of the game is really great, but it's not sort of drawn me back in or addicted me to the game like I was when the game came out. But saying that, I played a session with friends and had a really good time. And there's a lot more playlists since I last played. A lot of that is going through the older content, but it's still nice to have that and to have some updates, even if it is pretty minimal. But I'd say I'm pretty disappointed with season two, which is unfortunate because hopefully they took a break. Well, they took 6 months for season one with the idea that season two would have a lot more content, and then it doesn't have more content, and then this one's also taking 6 months, which is a little crazy. But I know they've got Creative Assembly working on the game as well. They seem to be working on a rumored battle royale mode for the game, so it does seem they're bringing more people onto it. And also, they need to get out from under the shadow of Forge and co-op. Like once they have those done and put into the game, they can move those people who are working on those aspects to the seasonal content and things like that, and extra maps and extra modes and playlists and cool stuff. So it should get better. It's just they've got like this big debt of stuff that they still need to do that they're kind of behind on, which is making everything else go slower. So kind of disappointing in terms of the live service aspects of Halo Infinite.
How is that community living? Is it doing quite well?
No, I mean it's got like enough of a player base where you'll find games. Like it's not like completely dead in terms of, I think it's like number 7 on the most played games on Xbox right now. So
Oh, it's still,
it's doing
yeah.
pretty well in terms of like, there's going to be, I don't know, 50,000 people playing at any moment, I'd say. I think there's around 11,000 on Steam, and so probably around 40,000 on Xbox, if I had to guess. But that's just like a rough like ballpark estimate. So it's okay in terms of like, if you want to play the game, you can play the game totally fine. But it's disappointing in terms of, because when the game launched, it had like a massive player base. It had like, I think it had like 270,000 on Steam alone, so it probably had like almost a million active players. And to go from that to like 20,000 is pretty, or like 20 to like 50,000 or whatever, is kind of not great. And they're kind of got a problem now where, because they've lost so many people from playing it week in, week out, they're going to need to like do more to bring those people back. And it's a shame, because I thought the game was fantastic when it came out, and I really think it was. So it sucks that they can't like maintain that momentum, because you almost feel like they've done all the hard work. Like, they've released a great game, but then to be a live service, they need to keep like that content coming in consistently over time. And so it's a shame that they can't do that. Although I will say that I'm not really much of a live service guy. I don't think either of us are, in terms of going back to like the same game, same multiplayer game over and over and over again. So I'm maybe not the target audience for it either, because I don't really have a game where I'm like that. Maybe Counter-Strike, but with that, I watch it more than I play it. I don't think I've played it in 8 or 9 months. So, I'm probably not the target audience for that, but I still think they could be doing a lot more and should be doing better, really. Then, after that, I started playing Rogue Legacy. So I saw Rogue Legacy 2 released on Xbox and PC, and it's been getting fantastic review scores. I think it's a 90 on Metacritic. And as listeners, and you'll know, I'm always interested in roguelikes and roguelites. It's one of my favorite genres. So it getting great review scores obviously was, it piqued my interest. And I played the original Rogue Legacy on PC years ago, and I enjoyed it, but I never finished it. So I wanted to go back to play the first game again on Xbox and beat it before playing the sequel. But I'm not sure if it was like the best idea, because I feel like, I don't know. I mean, it's tough, because on the one hand, I feel like if I'd have gone straight to the sequel, it might have been hard to go back to the original, because the original's kind of dated by now. So if I like got all of the quality of life stuff from the sequel, then I might be like, oh, I can't go back to the first one ever. Like, it sometimes games can do that, where they like, the sequel is so much better than the original that it kind of ruins the original sort of retroactively. So I feel like that is probably a possibility, but I'd say I can feel the age of the game. It's still really fun, though. I think the real reason I may regret this is because it's more of a time commitment than I was expecting. I think it's probably going to take me about 30 to 40 hours to get the completion, which is going to be like the situation where like I'm going to get the completion, and then I'm going to be burned out on the game to not want to go immediately to the sequel. And then other games are going to come out, and you know how it is. Other games come out, you get interested in those, you play those, and then you just never play the sequel, or you play the sequel like 3 years later or something than you originally planned to. So I feel like that's probably what's going to happen. But I'm still enjoying my time with the game. It has a ton of persistent upgrades. So essentially, you go through a castle and you fight enemies and you collect gold, runes, blueprints, and it's sort of like a Castlevania style game in terms of, you move side to side. There's some light platforming, there's some, secrets, there's, chickens hidden in candlesticks and stuff like that for you to collect to get health. And you get the idea. It's very, very inspired by those sort of old Castlevania games. And there's bosses in each major region. And then when you die, which you will do, like almost certainly, you keep all of the gold and all of the runes and the blueprints, and then you use the gold to upgrade your character. And the character upgrades are basically almost all of them are like they're like different versions of characters. So like a mage or like a barbarian, a knave, things like that. Different character classes. One that's really good at critting, one that has loads of health, one that is really good with spells and has lots of mana. That kind of stuff. You unlock a lot of characters like those, and then you also get raw stat upgrades. So higher attack damage, higher crit chance, higher health, better armor. You can carry more armor, that kind of thing. It's basically just point attributes, and you use the gold to do that. And then you can also use the gold to buy different equipment. So buy different armor, buy different weapons, and that's kind of interesting because there's some that let you acquire more gold per run, but they don't really give you much defensively or offensively. So it's kind of like a risk reward type thing because the longer you survive, the more gold you get. So you're kind of challenging yourself in that sense if you focus on getting like a percentage boost to the gold you collect for like lower survivability. There's vampirism as well, so you can lower your maximum health to make it so that when you kill enemies, you heal. So it's not all like pure stats boost stuff. There's some like build variety you can do and switch things out to focus on which class you've got and focus on what the objective of your next run is going to be. And you can use this like architect guy to lock down the castle. So like on your previous run, instead of it changing the layout of the castle, it will keep it the same, but you get less gold. That's really useful if you want to do like boss runs where you're not worried about getting gold. You just want to defeat the next boss in the story and you just want to remember the layout of the previous sort of dungeon that you went through. And then there's these runes that give you upgrades in terms of being able to like double jump and being able to dash and collecting more gold and getting vampirism, making the enemies tougher, making the enemies easier, that kind of thing. And you can stack those runes on top of each other as well. So it's got like a lot of interesting mechanics that I quite like. Although it does feel a bit basic at this point in terms of what games like Hades have done. You don't really like all the weapons you have are just different versions of swords and they just do different amounts of damage. There's not like different play styles really in terms of the combat. The combat always functions the same. And then the other interesting mechanic about the game is that you're essentially playing like a lineage in terms of when your character dies, the way like you get all of the gold is because it's part of like your family estate. And so your son or daughter inherits that gold. And in the family tree, you get a choice between three different characters, and those characters can all have different randomized traits. So you can get like a character that gets like knocked back more by attacks or doesn't get knocked back at all, or is a dwarf and so can fit through like into small areas, but also it's riskier hitting enemies if you're a dwarf because you have to get closer to them to actually hit them with your sword because your sword also is smaller. So there's lots of interesting characters. There's one that's like super annoying that you'll never take, which is a character that has vertigo, and what it does is it flips the entire screen around, so it's like you're walking on the ceiling instead of walking on the floor, and it's just like it messes with your eyes and your mind, and like when you jump downwards instead of upwards because the screen's flipped. So that one's a nightmare. But there's tons of these different traits that your characters can have, which keeps the game compelling as well. Although normally I find that at this stage, I just want like traits that are purely cosmetic and just don't affect the run much because you just get used to the sort of main combat loop. And it really feels like, I think my biggest problem with the game in terms of what I was hoping for is that it feels less flexible than Hades and a lot of roguelikes that I love, in that you're just meant to fail a ton of times. You're just meant to like get a bunch of money, die, upgrade your guy, get a bunch of money, die, upgrade your guy, get a bunch of money, die. And that's quite good if you're not, I don't know, if you like, if you really love progression systems and feeling like you're getting stronger. But I wish there was more of a skill element to it. And there is obviously a skill element to the game. It's not like there's not many cases of unavoidable damage, for example. So if you are like really, really good, you can, beat the game on your first run, I'm sure. But it seems very, very unlikely for that to be the case. So that's kind of annoying. But there's these optional bosses that I found that I love because they're super challenging, but they give you a set character to play at like a set level with set abilities, so you can't use like any of your upgrades. And they're really enjoyable because they're super difficult but really satisfying because you know that everyone who plays it and what you're playing as is like the intended exact challenge, which is nice.
That's really cool. I have a couple questions for you. Like, have you beat your first playthrough?
No,
No.
and that's the other thing about the game is it feels kind of less. It's very like a minimal roguelite because you don't really do runs of this game essentially. Like you're essentially building up to like beat the game, and then when you've beaten the game, you've basically beaten the game. You can go to New Game Plus, and New Game Plus just makes everything harder. But it's kind of like you essentially beat everything in the game in one playthrough, and then you can do like a couple more to get like better equipment. But then after like New Game Plus 2, New Game Plus 3, you'll have all the achievements, you'll have every item, you'll have beaten every boss. Like the bosses in New Game Plus are the same as in New Game. For example, there's like 5 bosses and that's it, except for the secret optional bosses. But those are those don't like you don't like get like new areas to explore to fight those optional bosses. They're just in the boss rooms of the original 4 bosses.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of, I don't know, it's very light on the roguelike elements, I think,
Right.
in terms of it. It's maybe a good entry point to the genre, perhaps.
Right. And I was looking, the reason I asked is because I was just like looking at the trophy guide while you were talking, and I'm seeing it's an 8 out of 10. It requires 3 playthroughs and it's about 50 hours. And so I was kind of like trying to gauge where you were specifically, because I mean, this isn't impossible, but it's just like you said, it's very interesting how it's not like a roguelike, because once you beat the bosses, that's it. And yeah, there's optional ones, but I mean, you could just go through and
Yeah, it's like as well, another sense that it's unlike most roguelikes is that when you beat a boss on one playthrough, like you might beat like the first boss and then you might die later in the run. When you go back to do a new run, that first boss stays dead. You don't re-kill that boss ever again. Once they're dead, they're gone until you get to New Game Plus. So it kind of feels more like a role-playing game, more like that than a roguelike in some ways, which is really interesting. Like I think it's quite a unique game in that sense that it does sort of blend the genres together a bit more. But yeah, I'm more excited to play Rogue Legacy 2, and I am definitely enjoying it. But I think like your first playthrough will be the longest. Like you'll probably spend maybe 30 hours on the first playthrough and then maybe 10, 15 on the next ones. There is a really hard achievement though, which is to beat the game, dying fewer than I think 15 times. And you can sort of exploit it. There's a way to kind of farm gold that you can do to just make like your second life super powerful because you just get loads of gold and get loads of upgrades immediately on like your second run. So that, but although that is very time consuming to do that, so I feel like I'm probably just going to go for it regularly. I think I'm going to go for it as well after I do everything else because the optional bosses are variants of the original bosses, but like super hard versions of them. So it's quite what I really like about them. Again, I've talked about how much I love those optional bosses. The other aspect I really like is that when you do those, you feel like you've really mastered the original fight as well, because this is like the original fight but super difficult. So once you've done that version and you can like nail down the patterns, the original fight then feels really slow paced in comparison. Like the attacks are really easy to dodge, and you just feel like you could do it with your eyes closed, that kind of thing. And that always feels really cool to me. I love when there is that skill aspect to roguelikes, and that's probably my favorite part of the game, really, because it kind of goes against a lot of the other stuff in terms of the stats building type aspects of it. So I'm enjoying it. I'd recommend it. I feel like for most people, unless you're like me and you feel like you have to play the first one before the second one, you should probably just go to the second one. Although I've not played the second one, so I don't know. But everyone seems to be super high on it and saying it's like an improvement in every way, and it's really interesting and really compelling. So I like the original; it's a good game, but I feel like the second is probably a great game, and so that's probably the one most people should go into straight away.
well, I'm sold. I just looked it up, and Rogue Legacy is on Vita. I know what my next Vita game is. I'm gonna try to platinum it.
Nice. Yeah, that would be a good Vita game, I think, for sure. Because it's really simple as well in terms of like the control. You can use like a D-pad to move left and right, and you just jump and you attack, and you press B to use like a magic spell, and then that's it basically. There's like other special abilities on the Y button on Xbox, and but that's basically it. So it's like a really simple game to control and play, and probably scales quite well to a smaller screen as well. It's very the way it looks is very vibrant, but also simplistic, so it probably translates quite well. There's not like tons of like effects going on the screen that you can't, or yeah, like tons of like complicated effects going on the screen that you can't. There is some bullet hell aspects, but it's still really simplistic in terms of visuals. So yeah, I think that'll be a good game for the Vita.
Perfect.
And then finally, the last game I've been playing is Apex Legends. I'm not sure if I was playing it last time we spoke, but I'm playing it even more now. So Shane, Edwin, and Herb, my friends, basically got me addicted to the game. So I'm blaming them for this. But I really love the combat of this game, and I used to be really good at the game, and I'm playing a ton of it and getting back to like the level that I was at. And I feel like I'm actually getting there, or maybe surpassing it in some ways, which is just an amazing feeling. And I think part of it is because I'm playing it on my new OLED for the first time, really, these past few weeks. And then also, it's got a next gen patch as well, which just makes it feel so smooth and responsive. And it's helping my aim get better as well, and just making me more consistent because my setup is a lot better as well. And it's just unbelievably satisfying. I love how all the weapons feel super distinctive. I love the combat loop. I love how it encourages a really aggressive play style. You know, a lot of battle royale games, people just hide on top of a building or sit in a bush and take pot shots at people. And if you sort of shoot someone in the head, they die immediately and they can't respond. This game isn't like that. There's only like one weapon in the game that will kill someone in one shot with a headshot. So it's just fits my play style of wanting to play quite quickly with a lot of health and a lot of skill and being aggressive in combat and taking on fights. And the movement system is great. Obviously, this comes from a lot of the DNA of Titanfall, and that game has fantastic movement. This game has fantastic movement. The sliding is incredible. The grappling hook with Pathfinder is incredible. So I think I have to honestly. I was on the fence about it in terms of my top 10 games of all time and like my game of the year and things like that. I feel like at this point I probably have to make like crown Apex as like one of my favorite games of all time, even though it's a multiplayer only battle royale, which it does. You know, I'm not anti multiplayer as much as you are, but I definitely do feel sort of that like, oh no, you know, greatest game of all time has to be you know Deus Ex or Bioshock or you know you get the idea, right?
Right.
Like I definitely do have some draw to that, but I feel like Apex probably is going to enter like the lower, well, I guess the higher sort of top tens, like top 10, top 8, something like
Is
that.
this gonna surpass Halo 3?
Yeah, I mean, Halo 3 isn't in my top 10 games of all time. So,
Right, but like in terms of like that 360 generation where you're in high school and you know you play online a lot. Maybe it's Halo 4, but like where you play online a lot and you have those
for,
memories with your friends of like playing a ton of multiplayer. You said that.
yeah, for me, Halo 3 was definitely special. Although I'd say, honestly, I think Call of Duty Black Ops 2 was
Wow.
bigger for me than Halo 3 in terms of which I had a better time playing. I remember it was weird because I really liked Halo a lot more than COD when COD was like Modern Warfare 2. I really didn't enjoy Modern Warfare 2's multiplayer, which is a hot take, I guess, because a lot of people look back on it fondly. But everything's super overpowered in that game, and things kill you really quickly. And there's like Noob Tube, Poor Man Army, Danger Close, and it's kind of annoying. I think it's a good game if you're a sniper, maybe, but that wasn't my play style. And I really didn't love that game, and I don't know why. It just never really clicked with me. But then I enjoyed Black Ops 1, and then Black Ops 2 was really where they perfected it in terms of I like the maps and I really like the combat system of that game. So that's probably, in terms of the 360 era, that's probably my favorite multiplayer shooter. And I don't know, I think Apex probably does surpass it. I feel sad as well because I really enjoyed Titanfall and Titanfall 2, but they kind of flopped in terms of they didn't stay very active for that long and they didn't sell particularly well. And it's kind of a shame because I played them quite a bit, but I wish I played them more. But it's one of those things where like less people are playing it, and that means the people that are on it are more hardcore, and so it's kind of unforgiving to try and play it. And then also no friends are playing it, no one's talking about it, so you tend to think of it less. And then it just results in kind of a spiral where you play it a decent amount, but you don't play it every day, you don't play it every week. And then eventually the game's just, no one's playing the game. And then you kind of look back and regret it because you feel like you kind of missed out a little. But I did play a lot of both of those games. But given the amount I play Apex now, I'm kind of like, I wish I had like Apex for like the BR mode, and then had Titanfall for just like the regular multiplayer with less sort of hero ability focus and that kind of thing. So it's a shame there's not. I mean, I'd really love to see a Titanfall 3, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But
That's really cool. I'm glad that you're doing that. I was actually a little bit surprised that the Stanley Parable wasn't on your list, and that leads us to the topic on the table. Are you all done with your games?
yeah, yeah, that's everything.
Okay, that's perfect then. We talked about this, or we messaged about it a little bit earlier. The list is hilarious. It's a great list, but it is making a lot of achievement hunters pretty angry because there's some stuff where you have to like play the entirety of a Tuesday, which I think is hilarious. I think first and foremost, people need to know like this list is supposed to be funny. That's the point. But then I'm seeing so many people who are angry because it does alienate some people, and I'm trying to like gauge like funny versus alienating people, and like it's not exactly that the list is bad. It's not. It's just that it's like a little bit janky. There's people who have played the entirety of a Tuesday, like 24 hours, and then the achievements and the trophies are not popping, and they're like, "What is the like? What do you have to do specifically for that to happen?" And there's also like ways to get around it. There's like one where you don't play the game for 10 years. You just modify the clock. It's funny. It's supposed to be funny. But I was just like curious, kind of like where you stand on this, and like if you've seen anybody complain or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love the achievement list, and I love the original Stanley Parable. I feel like I want to get to the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe and see what all the new stuff they added is, because I think the Stanley Parable at this point is like a very important moment, or like a milestone in terms of narrative in games, and narrative in indie games specifically. Because I think when that game came out, it was almost like an urban legend type game, right? Because it focuses on this like meta narrative, and you don't really understand what's going on, and the developers break the fourth wall and they sort of talk to you directly, and you're trapped in like this cycle. I mean, it's almost like a time loop game in that sense, right? And I think it's really like an amazing, brilliant game. And I think at the time people were like, "Oh yeah, this is cool," and then other people kind of tried to do similar things in horror and in sci-fi, and it never really resonated as well as the original game. And so I think that's led people to sort of look back at it and realize, like, yeah, this game was amazing and really important for, I don't know, gaming as a whole, or walking simulators, or whatever. I mean, I think it probably is for me like the greatest ever walking simulator. I know some people would say probably Gone Home is probably the other contender for that, but I think the Stanley Parable is fantastic. So I really like the achievement list, and yeah, for anyone who hasn't heard of the game, that like tongue in cheek, self aware, very meta tone to the achievements fits with the game as a whole. Like that's, it's kind of like a comedy game in some ways. So it's not like it's like a mistake, or that it's mean spirited, I guess, because I think that's probably what the debate is. If people are unhappy about it, is this idea of it being like a big like fuck you to the players, right? Like we hate you, do this. But it's more like a light-hearted joke, I think. Really, it's just sort of meant to be taken in good fun, and it's meant to be pushing the boundaries of what's conventional or acceptable in the way that the game does within its narrative and within its design. So it fits perfectly with the game, I think, is the first thing to really emphasize. But I can understand people being annoyed about it as well if they didn't know what they were getting into. But I want to play it, and I want to experience all the new Ultra Deluxe content, and I want to get all of the achievements. And I think the list is amazing. I think one of the ways I feel like it's kind of not meant to be really mean spirited is that there's not really any achievements on there that are impossible or completely ludicrous. The 10-year one is the one that's like pushing it the most, obviously. Like that one arguably is ludicrous, and I'm kind of annoyed that there is like a workaround for it. Like I'm happy in some ways and sad in other ways that they didn't make it so you actually had to avoid playing the game, avoid booting the game for 10 years.
I think the
It's
idea of it is that like they are saying fuck you to achievement hunters, but then they're also like, but you can still do it. Like it's supposed to be like the meta. It's the meta. It's like you're reading this and you know that these suck, but you're gonna do it. You're gonna do it. And it's like I think it's playful and very funny of the developers, but I think that it is super funny unless it's not effectively done right, which is like kind of how it is right now
Yeah, but
because it's
I
not.
was gonna say that I don't think it's like I don't really think it's mean spirited or like an fu, because I think the 10-year one, you can make the argument that it's like they want an achievement that's essentially like time dated, like time limited achievements, which is quite cool. And it is like mocking like other games in a sense that do that kind of stuff. And there's more egregious achievements in games that are played totally safe, in my opinion, in terms of like ridiculously difficult stuff or outright impossible stuff, being like number one on the leaderboard or whatever, or the seriously achievements in Gears of War and stuff like that. So I feel like it's it's self aware enough that it's fine, and then also the list is quite small. This they could have put like 150 achievements in this game if they wanted to, and made most of them like one gamer score each or whatever, and that would be like quite mean spirited at that point. I think
I think you're
if
right.
they did that, I mean, like Halo Master Chief Collection has a ridiculous amount of achievement. I think it's 500, maybe 700 achievements in that game. That's like completely ridiculous. Stanley Parable has I think 20, maybe
Yeah,
less
it
than
doesn't have very
20, or
many.
a really small amount.
Yeah,
So I think it's not meant to be like ultra disrespectful. They could have been a lot worse. Is I guess the thing that I would say as a pessimist, I
I agree. I
suppose.
agree, but it's still like it's poking fun at the hunters, which is totally fine. You're allowed to do that. Like,
Yeah, and I think most of them as well. Like the real bad one again is the
yeah,
10-year one.
yeah.
The others aren't, and the Tuesday one. The other ones aren't. The other ones are jokes in themselves, but aren't like dickish in terms of the
No,
demands on the player,
no.
right? Like there's one like to interact with the door 5 times or something, and there's one to like there's like a passcode to a door, and the achievement's just to enter the number 8 over and over and over again, and stuff like that. And there's an achievement for unlocking another achievement, and then there's an achievement that is pretending to be like a test broken achievement. That stuff isn't like mean to achievement hunters. I'd argue that that stuff is actually quite rewarding to achievement hunters, because it's like they've specifically, it's the thing that we talk about that we love a lot of the time, is when the achievement list is really thoughtful and isn't just like complete act 1, complete act 2, kill 25 enemies with grenades, that type of stuff,
Right.
right? These achievements are like they've specifically gone out of their way to make these, and some of them they've made them quite dickish. But again, it's in like a
It's like
a
fun.
light-hearted
Yeah.
way, and in the spirit of the narrative of the game as well. So for me, I'm not offended about it. I mean, I think I was reading up on it, and most people seem to be pretty happy with it from what I've seen on True Achievements. Although there is some stuff where, because in this game you repeat a lot of things, I think there's some triggers that are a bit awkward in terms of like you can go past a point and then it's awkward to access an area that you need for an achievement. If anything was going to be my criticism, I feel like that type of thing is probably where it falls down and it might get annoying. Where like if you go like a specific path the first few times, it means that it's really awkward to then get this achievement that would have been easier otherwise. I feel like that kind of thing would be more likely to annoy me personally. But yeah, I think I'm going to enjoy getting the completion for it. I mean, I should start it soon, because they might find a way to patch out that 10-year achievement, and then it would be a nightmare, of course.
Well, I can't wait for what is it going to be? 20. It's going to be 2032 when there's the article that's like someone got the 10-year achievement. It's like the first person to get the actual 10-year achievement. It's like someone's going to do it. Someone will wait the 10
Yeah, I
years.
mean, it's funny as well because it's not actually even a hard achievement.
No.
You just have to play the game once and then not. I mean, you could even, if you really wanted to, you could buy the game, you could boot it up today, and you could just like stay on the main menu, or like go like start the game, and then close the game and just never play it again for 10 years, and then do your playthrough in 10 years time. I feel like the thing for me is it's really bad, and they are playing with fire. In that, imagine if you did that and then you came back to it 10 years later and it didn't unlock and it just
Oh,
didn't work, because then it would reset the clock another 10 years, right? Because you've played, because if it's not unlocked correctly, but it's saved that you've reopened and replayed the game, you'd have to wait another 10 years to attempt it again. So that for me would be another like, okay, that's super messed up if that happens.
I sadly want that to happen to someone. It's like, oh,
That's
I
terrible.
know, but it's like, imagine if you started the game at 10 a.m. and then you get on that day at like 9 a.m. and it's like, oh, it hasn't been quite the 10 years. It's
Oh
like,
no.
shit, you fucked up. Oh my god, no, I hope that doesn't happen to anyone.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, there's
terrible.
situations where like someone's going to be round someone's house and they're just going to load it up because they're just interested in the game or whatever. Like, and it's going to be like 4 years later or whatever, and they were trying to get the 10-year achievement, stuff like that. I mean, you'd have to like, you'd want to like, after, if you were going for it legitimately, you'd want to uninstall the game and like try to like hide it from like ever being able to be installed before that like 10-year window, right? Like you'd want to find a way to like blacklist the game completely so it just can't be booted up or something.
Dude, you're game sharing with someone and then they get on your account and they buy it and they play, or they download it and then they play it. It's like, oh, dude, I was trying not to play that for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, shoot. That's so funny. But I mean, yeah, I'm not mad at this list. I've been seeing people complain on like Discord servers, like the trophy hunting Discord servers that I'm in. And it's just kind of like, it's one of those things where it's just like, I get the frustration, but it's also really funny, guys. Like you gotta laugh sometimes because this is awesome. Like you definitely opened my eyes to like they did try with this list, and we get sometimes where people like they just don't do the list. They just do Act 1, complete Act 1, complete Act 2, and this is not that. This is very funny, very good. I mean the day that you sent me that, I mean I read through the whole list because I was like, this is awesome. This is
Yeah, you want to, when you look at the list, you want to keep reading it.
yeah.
Like, and there's a ton of games where, you know, even as an achievement hunter, I don't want to keep reading the list. I read like a few and I'm like, okay, this is really boring.
Yep.
Or it's got like plot spoilers in the achievement list,
Oh,
and
God,
then
I
you're
hate
like,
that.
okay, well, you know, fuck me, I guess. And then, but you know, the Stanley Parable doesn't do any of that. So I think they knew what they were doing, and I think it's still, you know, I think they're like socially aware enough to know what they're doing with it. And it's not like, again, it's not like they've got like a game where it doesn't fit with the narrative or it doesn't fit with the style of the game, where it's like they've just made like a dickish like one gamer score achievement for like paired with a normal list. Like, again, that type of thing really annoys me. So yeah, I think they've done it well.
I do too. All right. Well, that kind of brings us to the end. Do you have a trophy or achievement of the week this week?
Yeah, so mine's from the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. I could have gone with pretty much any of them. I really recommend that everyone looks at the list.
I do
But
too.
I went with Commitment, which is to play the Stanley Parable for the entire duration of a Tuesday. I went with it because it's now the hardest achievement and most time-consuming achievement. And also, yeah, I mean, I kind of maybe slightly guilt tripped you a little for like the whole like I really hope that happens to someone with the 10-year one, but I was laughing with this one because I saw before we recorded I saw like the achievement guides for it on True Achievements, and there's like one guy who's like super mad on well, maybe not super mad, slightly annoyed online because he attempted the achievement and did it like he left the game running for 24 hours and then it just didn't work, and he was complaining like my electricity bill's going to be really high now and all of it. Like, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, you shouldn't take joy in it, but you know,
I'm not.
it's easy to do so sometimes.
Yeah, it's
But,
it's silly, but it sucks. It sucks for that guy. It's like I hope that doesn't happen to me, but it will. Like
yeah,
that's how the karma works, you know. But
yeah. So
my trophy of the week is from the Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. I was just reading through the list because I was looking through like the most popular games currently on the PSN profiles page, and I'm actually surprised that like Elden Ring's number 1 and then number 3 is Horizon. So it's like it's not even 1,000 player difference. It's like really close, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting that those games are still kicking real hard. And so I saw towards the bottom of the list Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, and I saw a trophy that's called Do or Do Not. There is no try, and it's just complete all the galaxy challenges. And I'm like, oh man, during the whole list, they just have a bunch of Star Wars quotes, and they're like naming the trophies after that. And I'm like, I loved themed lists like that. Like I get that it's a Star Wars game, but they could have just like, you know, half-assed it like Horizon, where they just do the name of the achievements. So it was really nice to see like they did a bunch of Star Wars quotes, and then tied them to like things that you're going to be doing. And I just was like, that's awesome. That's definitely really fun. So I chose that was my my trophy of the week.
Yeah, nice. It seems like that that Lego Star Wars game seems to, make fun of Star Wars, but also be a love letter to the characters and the stories as well. I really, those games are really charming.
They really are, and I don't know if I'll ever play it. It seems like a long one, and I haven't been into Lego games. Like the last one I played was like Marvel Superheroes, I think Marvel Heroes, something like
Yeah,
that.
I'm over it as well. I remember back in the day, they were like, back when like you couldn't get like 10-minute completions and stuff. They were some of the easiest completions
Mm-hmm.
because it was like, oh, it takes like 8 hours and it's like a 3 out of 10 difficulty, or like takes like 8 to like 20 hours depending on which Lego game. But I remember they used to be sort of seen as like easy completions, like way back in like the 360 PS3 era, and I used to play a lot of them then, and then just got like burned out on them forever because the gameplay is basically the same in all of them. But
Yeah.
this one's more interesting because they do seem to have revamped things. But it's such a huge game. Like everyone talks about how much content there is and how it covers so many movies and has so many scenes and so many characters and so many unlockables that yeah, I think it will probably be too overwhelming for me as well to commit that much time to a Lego game. Like I'd rather, for me, I'd rather the games be a bit shorter. But I think it's, I'm obviously not the target audience because I'm neither a huge Star Wars fan nor, you know, super into Lego or young enough to have this game be like my, my complete jam or whatever. So I definitely get why it is like it is, and probably should be that way.
Well, I'm a decent Star Wars fan. I'm not gonna say I'm the biggest, but definitely the new the new trilogy not very good. And so it doesn't. If it was like really good, I'd probably be on this day one. But I'm just not. I'm not about it. And then I have to do all of the other stuff, and I'm like, no. I just it's something that I'm kind of like I'm pass. Like pass it. I'm not gonna do this. I'd rather be playing a lot of the games that are coming out this year. That you know how I am with the Game Awards. It's like I want to be playing these games that are gonna be nominated for like the best games of this year. And I doubt that the Star Wars Lego game is just gonna be in that conversation. So I'm like, nah. I'll pass on it. If there's ever like a time where I don't have a huge backlog and I don't have anything to play, boom, I can jump into this. But yeah, no, not right now.
Yeah, for sure.
And then any final thoughts, AJ?
No, I mean, I'm not sure I'll be able to play as much as I have these past 2 weeks. I feel like I got a lot done and was quite productive, so that was good. But I'm definitely going to keep playing Apex. Tomorrow, the new season starts, which changes the map rotation. I'm kind of annoyed because they're taking out my favorite map, which sucks. They're putting in a pretty good map, though, so that's nice. But they're taking out my favorite map.
Ooh.
And then they're also taking out my favorite weapon. Like, the way you can, like, craft weapons or you can find them on the ground in the environment. And they're taking out my favorite weapon and putting it in like a craftable thing. And crafting sucks in this game. I don't know why they added it. It just means that you sort of have to wait around and collect more stuff and sort of stand around using a big thing. I mean, it kind of makes you a bit more vulnerable, maybe, but the best thing about the game is like running around and searching for people and getting in fights. So crafting is pretty slow paced and annoying. So both of those things about the new season are a bit eh. And the newest map in the game isn't very good in my opinion, but they're making big changes to it. So it'll be exciting to see if they've fixed a lot of the problems with it. But time will tell. So that's sort of coming up, right tomorrow, which will be cool.
All right. And that's it for the show. Thanks for listening. Peace out. Happy hunting.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to Complete Edition. If you like the content, consider supporting us on patreon.com/completion club. If you have any questions or would like to reach us, email completionclub@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Complete Edition.